Hey guys, welcome back to Before You Die, a series based around not only reviewing games, but diving into them on a deeper level. Because while many games have good gameplay, writing, and design, not all games have soul. So today, we're here to answer one simple question. Should you play Mass Effect 1 before you die?
There is a realm of existence so far beyond your own, you cannot even imagine it. I am beyond your comprehension. I am sovereign.
I want to start this Before You Die where I think almost any Mass Effect video should, the universe. Because no matter how old I get, no matter how many games I play, whenever I think about storytelling in games, I'm immediately reminded of Mass Effect 1 with what might be the best main narrative and world building this medium has ever seen. For those of you that don't know, the basic premise of Mass Effect 1 revolves around Commander Shepard and the Reapers. In the year 2183, humanity has just recently come into contact with a galactic council and community of different alien species, all congregating on one massive and mysterious space station known as the Citadel. In a bid for humanity to join the Spectres, secret agents that serve the Council, Commander Shepard is sent on a mission with a Turian Spectre to see if he has what it takes. During this escapade, though, a tremendous conspiracy is unearthed regarding an ancient race of sentient machines known as the Reapers, who are being helped by a rogue Spectre named Saren. The Reapers themselves are rumored to purge the galaxy of all sufficiently intelligent organic life every 50,000 years in a cycle that has been taking place for millions. And the entire first Mass Effect game is all about uncovering this mystery behind the Reapers and Saren while taking Commander Shepard from planet to planet in a galaxy-spanning adventure. But throughout it all, far and away, the thing that makes Mass Effect 1 unforgettable isn't all of this setup, but the world building, the writing, and the soul. A great example of this is how even right at the start of the game, each character has a personality that really stands out, along with dialogue that's engaging while maintaining a fun tone. At a lot of points, it feels like a campy 90s sci-fi, but in a good way, with a lot of over-the-top and laughable reactions from characters, prime among them being how Ashley fawns over anything Commander Shepard says with glee within just an hour of meeting him.
It's my fault. I must have triggered some kind of security field when I approached it. You had to push me out of the way.
You had no way to know what would happen.
There's an almost funny fantasy behind scenes like this that makes the game feel ridiculous at times, but also so endearing, almost like being a Western cowboy trapped in a spaceship. And on top of this too, shots like this one here would never make it past HR in modern games, but they're present everywhere in Mass Effect 1. And for as tacky as they feel, they add a lot of indescribable but hilarious charm. This is an older game and it shows in a lot of ways, many of which we will be talking about here shortly, but that geriatric nature comes with a lot of allure too that would be so hard to pull off for so many reasons nowadays, and it makes the first Mass Effect game one of a kind. It has a darker and yet somehow also more whimsical tone than the rest of the series, and even more than that, just moving through this world immediately feels immersive. On the Normandy, for example, ship technicians or specialists sit in pods near the cockpit surrounded by massive computers, multiple elevators and stairwells lead to other hidden nooks and crannies, and everywhere you go, multiple people are working and staying busy. Don't get me wrong, it's not as good as most games nowadays or even the later Mass Effects, which saw improvements like companions walking around the ship dynamically, but for as old as this game is, it's surprising just how much this initial introduction to the series still pulls you in, and it's a great first impression that only gets heightened in one of my favorite introductions to a game ever. You see, after landing on Eden Prime and discovering part of the Reaper conspiracy, Commander Shepard and crew must fly back to the Citadel in order to alert the Council of what has happened. And it's here that the real game kicks off, and we're met with one of the most memorable scenes in gaming history, this. I remember vividly as a kid just how much of an effect this moment had on me. A world that already seemed fascinating and enthralling now was so much more epic in scale. And for the time, so few games were doing things like this. In fact, even almost 20 years later, this scene still hits like a truck. I imagine even for first-time players too. It perfectly captures the grandeur of this universe, the scale, and it gives the impression that you're about to fall into something really special. To me, it's the perfect encapsulation of everything that Mass Effect should be. A focus on not only awesome storytelling and main narrative beats, but a world that feels alive and epic. And this only gets better by the time you land on the Citadel, when you're met with one of my favorite cities in gaming history. A giant, sophisticated, almost utopian-looking alien space station that spans for thousands of miles, allowing Commander Shepard to walk around a small selection of different locations like presidential parks, seedy underground bars, or even brothels. For me at least, it's almost hard to put into words just how gripping this intro is. When you land on the Citadel, it's not just about being a cool place to see, it's also a place full of so much brand new and fascinating lore about alien races, like the Asari, Solarians, Turians, Elcor, Volus, Keepers, and the infamous Krogan. This is the first time you're seeing so many new things, and it all just makes sense and works. It's obvious how well realized this universe is, even from the moment you set down in its most notable location. And more than just being a combat arena or cool set piece, the Citadel is focused on good old-fashioned world building. A place where you can just sit and talk to people, learning about their cultures and history for hours on end. For example, here's a scene where I found a Volus ambassador named Din Cormac near the administrative districts on the Upper Citadel when I first landed, and asked him all about his people's backstory.
My people came to the Citadel shortly after the Asari and Solarians had discovered it. We were instrumental in establishing a standardized galactic economy. However, despite our long association with the Citadel and our many contributions to galactic society, we still do not hold a seat on the Council.
Tell me about Volus culture.
We are tribal by nature, but our ways are not violent. We barter and trade our lands and tribe members in order to increase status. Larger tribes often engulf smaller ones and eventually split again. Our society is very malleable, and our government is always shifting and changing. Since we're not physically adept, we trade our services for protection.
Things like this seem small and frankly probably boring for a lot of people at first, but when you put them in the context of a universe as well realized as Mass Effect, it makes the whole package feel so much more interesting and immersive. Walking around the Citadel at the beginning of the first game here isn't fun because it has the best graphics we've ever seen in the game, or the most realistic city, or the most fun movement mechanics. It's because I know no matter where I go, this game will reward me with utterly fascinating lore, history, and political intrigue that almost feels like reading a great book. Mass Effect 1 isn't about the spectacles. It's about those slower moments where even right at the beginning of the game, it isn't afraid to just drop you into an alien space and let you do nothing but talk for hours. It feels like something no games would possibly do nowadays, and maybe for good reason. After all, most players would get bored and fall off, but when you actually commit to something like this, it can make the entire ensemble so much more impactful because you truly get pulled into the world and want to know more. It truly feels genuine and real, with actual thought put into the politics, religions, financial institutions, and wars and conflicts between different races over thousands of years. And all of this is only made even better by the single best codex ever put in a video game, one that's not only filled with thousands of lines of text to pore over discussing topics like how different technologies in the universe work at a fundamental and scientific level, but also a huge amount of fully voiced over main entries that really bring you into the world. Honestly, I have no idea why more games, especially RPGs, don't just full-sail copy this idea. Being able to see something in the world and then just pull up your codex and listen to a professionally voiced over and extremely deep description of what that thing is and its history makes an otherwise quite daunting universe a joy to jump into. Here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. On board the Normandy, while exploring the ship, I came across the engine room on the lowest level, which at the center included a massive, mysterious glowing orb. By walking up to it and investigating, a codex entry was added to my database and allowed me to open it up and listen to some of this.
When subjected to an electrical current, the rare material dubbed Element Zero, or EZO, emits a dark energy field that raises or lowers the mass of all objects within it.
It's so cool being able to just walk up to things in the world and immediately have your curiosity met in such a profound way. And it shows just how much thought went into the universe of Mass Effect before the gameplay was likely even crafted. How people act, how they talk, what their politics are, religions, economies, racial tensions, and economic ideals of war, peace, and science, and so on and so on. But still, out of everything the world building of Mass Effect 1 does so right, there's one single thing that I like far and away the most that we don't quite get to see until later in the game: those ancient Cthulhian monsters and civilizations.
All advanced organic life had been extinguished. The Reapers retreated back through the Citadel relay into dark space, sealing it behind them.
I've always been a sucker for long-lost secrets and mysteries in not only games, but our real world. And for the same reasons, imagining that, say, Atlantis may have been a real place, or diving into the mysteries of ancient civilizations at Göbekli Tepe or Poverty Point is fun, playing Mass Effect gives those same feelings. Throughout multiple main missions in the story like Noveria and Pharos, Commander Shepard stumbles upon a wide variety of primeval entities and secrets that lend themselves to more questions than answers. Like the Thorian on Pharos, a massive glob of flesh and tentacles that can speak through the mouths of those it captures, twisting them into mindless servants whose literal memories and brain mold into the creature, allowing it to transfer the knowledge of ancient civilizations across millions of years between one another. It's such an awesome concept that you can't help but fall in love with. Or what about the Rachni on Noveria, a warrior culture of horrid bug-like monstrosities which can multiply by the millions in the blink of an eye, devouring entire planets in an instant as they black out the sun, which even almost sent the galaxy into a dark age many years ago before being saved by the Krogan, who after were rewarded by being infected with a genophage which rendered their future hopeless. Ideas and world building like this are utterly fascinating to me, and make what would otherwise be somewhat mundane missions and combat encounters so worth it, because you know at the end of it all, there's going to be a reveal that will have your mind racing and thinking before bed. Another perfect example of this is maybe one of the best missions in the entire Mass Effect series, one that comes right near the end of Mass Effect 1 when Commander Shepard and team must make their way to Ilos, a top-secret research planet home to the Protheans, a hyper-advanced race of aliens destroyed by the Reapers 50,000 years ago. On Ilos, you get to drive across a vast sea of buildings and tombs that rise into the sky, full of strange markings and patterns accompanied by haunting music, until you finally find a hidden passage that allows you to talk to a virtual intelligence on the station known as Virgil. Virgil tells you the story of the Protheans, their rise and fall to greatness, and how the Reapers came from the confines of dark space when they least expected, using their very infrastructure at the Citadel to charge headfirst into the bowels of their homeworlds, slowly hunting down every living Prothean and purging them from existence. You can probe Virgil on the eccentricities of the Protheans, on their culture, their people, their technology, and also what it means for humanity and other aliens in your time period, and most of all, how you can stop the Reapers. All while in the background of this entire scene, you can hear the evocative whines of musical notes, which make moments like this so damn special.
That all advanced organic life had been extinguished. The Reapers retreated back through the Citadel relay into dark space, sealing it behind them.
Talking to Virgil on Ilos isn't memorable because of a huge boss battle, insane cutscene, or some really fun gameplay moments. In fact, as with all missions in Mass Effect 1, actually playing through this area can be quite frustrating and hard to navigate, boring to play, and honestly a waste of time. But somehow, some way, all of these issues fall to the wayside right at the end because of the genuinely captivating ideas and mysteries that are unveiled in the story. It's not very often a game has me on the literal edge of my seat because of just the narrative and world alone. But Mass Effect 1 proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that not all games have to be gameplay first to be good. This is one of, if not the single greatest gaming universe that has ever been made, and stands tall as one of the great stories told in games even decades later as well. Culminating in a title that is boring to play but impossible to put down because you have to know what happens next, at least if you're into the story, and it makes you want to extract whatever little tidbits you can from the world. However, if you haven't picked up on it already, there are some issues, because for as amazing as the world building and main narrative of Mass Effect 1 is, it's not all good. Mass Effect 1 feels old. Even from the fresh coat of paint it got from the upgraded combat mechanics and graphics in the Legendary Edition that I played on, this game is still unmistakably not of this era, and it hasn't aged particularly well in many areas. And in fact, I don't think anything I could say right now would explain what I'm trying to say here better than this clip. It's hilarious even looking back now at this skirmish, knowing how much fun I had with this game as a kid, because now older and looking back more objectively at what I'm seeing on screen, man, this sucks. Combat is floaty, enemies barely react to shots, and there's almost no variety to speak of. Environments are bland and barren, making it feel like interior decorators in the future have died out, and the moment-to-moment gameplay and controls can be a mind-numbing experience to fight against at times. So much so that almost 3 hours into my new playthrough here, I had to just give up and turn the difficulty down to casual because I couldn't be bothered to put any brainpower into systems that felt so lackluster and boring. And speaking of systems, the ones on offer here are about as basic as they come. Despite being what I considered a hardcore RPG at the time, Mass Effect 1, and really the entire series as a whole in retrospect, is much more of an action-adventure title when compared to things like, say, Baldur's Gate or Pillars of Eternity. And in Mass Effect 1, while there are lots of attempts at being an RPG, nothing really hits that hard at all, and I'm surprised people bought into the fact that it was one even back in the day. For example, each squad mate, including yourself, gets a whole host of abilities they can choose from in combat, but upgrades for these essentially boil down to just making each ability incrementally stronger with absolutely no interesting choices on how to mold or mix and match. Guns and armor come in a variety of variants with a handful of modifications to pick from, but all essentially boil down to mundane things like extra toxic damage or recoil control. And the much beloved choice and consequence that this series is known for honestly just boils down to a handful of big decisions that have somewhat noticeable changes on how things play out in the future. For example, saving the Rachni Queen here in Mass Effect 1 lets you later recruit them for your war effort in Mass Effect 3. But either way, the main beats of the story are going to play out in the exact same fashion. It's all just flavor, albeit pretty fun flavor at that. And most other dialogue choices are like this too, with multiple options that all lead to the same exact response anyways, or Paragon and Renegade choices that are supposed to make you good or evil, but always result in the same core mission and principles in the end. And really, that's all to point out that while Mass Effect 1 does have the most hardcore RPG elements in the entire series, even here, the game feels so much more focused on storytelling and set pieces than trying to be a deep and systematic game with infinite replayability. In terms of choice and consequence as well again, for the time Mass Effect 1 was cool, but in comparison to the greats of now, it falls woefully short of greatness on the RPG front. On top of this as well, audio mixing and writing can feel amateurish at times, with one-note discussions with unimportant NPCs, and the all-too-common technical limitation of games of this time of only allowing one character to speak at a time, which makes things feel much more stinted and less dynamic. If you go and play something like, say, Expedition 33, for example, and then come back and play Mass Effect 1, it's almost jarring how much less naturally people speak and communicate with one another, constantly waiting their turn in every conversation, with no one talking over one another at all, and much more stilted line deliveries and ways of speaking. It's yet another reminder that you're playing a really old game with lots of limitations. And when you combine that with an exorbitant amount of horrible combat sections in the Mako in what seems to be every mission, it's no wonder it's hard to recommend this game to newcomers at all, with so many in the community suggesting you just start with the second game. Even as someone that absolutely loves Mass Effect 1 because it was one of the games that got me into gaming as a kid, I wouldn't fault anyone at all for saying they hate it for all the shortcomings either. Having said all of that though, it's important that we remember none of this is what makes the first Mass Effect game special, and isn't why you should play this game at all. For instance, for as mind-numbing as those fights on Pharos early in the campaign are, characterized by literally an hour of fighting nothing but mindless zombies in tight corridors with a janky camera to boot, that isn't why you'll remember this mission. What you'll remember about Pharos is that city in the sky, and the visions of what it must have been like before. The lore behind corrupt megacorporations conducting top-secret experiments of mind control and exploitation, that fateful choice to either spare the civilians or cut them down like cattle, and of course, the Thorian. After all the painful combat encounters you have to get through, all the fighting against the controls in the Mako, or running around using shallow RPG mechanics, you are rewarded with something that, in my opinion, so far outshines the negatives. Genuinely interesting world building and storytelling, something that for some reason is so hard to pull off, it seems, for most studios. Mass Effect 1 isn't a game you're meant to play, it's one you're meant to experience. And while it's not all good, that doesn't mean that the package as a whole isn't worth your time and effort. After all, remember, while old games like this often can be janky, that jank can lead to some greatness too. Like say combat encounters that make you feel like a god as your powers ragdoll everything around you, something the later games lack entirely with polish. Stuff like this is yet another reason I love Mass Effect 1 even more than the most beloved 2. But we'll talk about that more later in this video. For now, let's discuss another part of this game that can be quite a mixed bag, the side content.
Say, you're a bright kid. Would you be interested in earning a few extra credits?
It feels like ever since The Witcher 3 came out in 2015, there's been a lot more emphasis on side quests and activities. Side content in that game would often evolve into multi-hour-long chains of events with fleshed-out designs and consequences, and ever since, RPGs have been held to a higher standard. But sadly, Mass Effect 1 came out in 2007, before these standards were so high, and it shows. Many of the side quests and activities in this game are nothing more than very fast fetch quests that often have so little payoff. For example, early on I met with the Asari consort on the Citadel who wanted to talk to a Turian general who was spreading false rumors about her. The entire mission involves just quickly teleporting to the Bari's Inn, talking to him for 1 minute about how he likes her, and then telling him to stop, after which you just go back to the consort and either bang her or get a secret code. Another mission on the Citadel called Homecoming tells the tale of a grieving husband whose wife's body has not been returned to him after she was killed in action. For the actual quest itself, you literally just have to walk 30 feet away to talk to an Alliance recruiter who lets you know that the body can be used for science experiments to help humanity, and you have to decide what to do. In theory, this is actually a fairly interesting moral conundrum to solve and a good setup for a quest. But in actual gameplay, it results in just walking a couple of steps back and forth, talking to two people, and then barely any payoff happening either in Mass Effect 1 or the later games. Side content in Mass Effect 1 at many times feels like this. Needless filler that serves to simply add a little bit of flavor instead of crafting genuinely interesting stories and experiences that carry on for hours. Oftentimes the quests are short, half-baked, and worst of all, will send you to barren planets devoid of almost any life at all. Because you see, in Mass Effect 1, one of the original big selling points of the title was just how big the universe was. Almost like, say, Starfield today, the game provided large swaths of planets you could land on and drive around in. But just like in Starfield as well, they are mind-numbingly boring and bland. Many side assignments and quests will lead you to desolate rocks which you must drive around shooting thresher maws, or just find one dead body in the middle of nowhere with special items and instructions, and boom, quest is complete. Things like this are a little cool at first because they make the universe actually feel expansive and lived in a way, but by the third time you land on a barren planet with absolutely nothing to do, it gets really old. And while there are some side quests that do provide a little more meat on the bone or fun nods to things that happen in future games, like meeting the original EDAI in the Cerberus mission, I think I can confidently say that there's not a single side mission or assignment that was actually really worth it in Mass Effect 1. In fact, the only bit of side content that does feel a little more involved and thought out is the Bring Down the Sky saga, which originally was a DLC for the first game and is now included in the Legendary Edition at no extra cost, just like all of the other DLCs for the other games as well. So overall, while the side content in Mass Effect 1 does provide some interesting lore or ideas in principle at times, and even a handful of moral conundrums, all of it just feels so shallow in comparison to the main offerings, that being the story of the Reapers, the universe, and Commander Shepard. When you contrast an environment and mission like, say, Noveria in the main story against the usual backdrop and setup of a barren planet and side assignment, it's obvious where all of the developers' attention went to. It truly feels like the team simply added a bunch of side stuff because that's what you're supposed to do in an RPG without actually having any aspirations of making these missions great or memorable at all. Luckily though, in future iterations, this pain point was improved upon some. And speaking of things that started somewhat weak but only got better in the series as time went on, we need to talk about something lots of Mass Effect fans love: the companions.
The name's Rex. The Shadow Broker paid me a lot of money to get rid of Fist. Only you got there first.
The Reapers? But I have never heard of. How do you know this? What evidence do you have?
Whenever I hear other people talk about why they love the Mass Effect series, the first thing that usually comes up is the companions, which to me is so weird, because for as cool as some of the cast is in all of the games, I think the real lifeblood of Mass Effect is the world, the lore, and the storytelling. Nonetheless though, companions are still an integral part of the universe, and on this front, Mass Effect 1 is once again a mixed bag. On one hand, it's the game that introduces us to so many fan favorites like Garrus, Rex, Liara, Tali, and Joker. But in contrast, these first renditions of each character are without a doubt their weakest. Garrus assuredly has that cool space cop aesthetic right off the bat, but without the bravado he gains from the second game onward. Liara looks cool, but is completely one-note and uninteresting in the first game, once again only finding her footing in the later entries. And overall, each and every companion you find along this journey just lacks that certain something or oomph that makes them great in the later titles. Outside of Rex, that is, at least, even right off the bat in the first game, he feels fully realized and understood, and is as badass and funny as they come. I would also say Joker shines here quite a bit, with a lot of scenes being funny that he's in, but overall, it's interesting because even for the time, BioWare was so lauded for their character writing, but in retrospect now, it's apparent just how weak this cast can be at times, suffering from trophy wife archetypes and mundane questlines. Don't get me wrong, each member of this cast still does have some solid moments or one-liners throughout the story, but it's quite obvious that the writing team here was still figuring out each character's personalities during development, and as I mentioned before, it's only in the later games that they really start to shine. To give you a specific example of this too, let's look at Liara. In the later Mass Effect games, she almost feels like a completely different person. She's a badass warrior who has her own opinions and brings a lot to each encounter. Hell, at one point, she even becomes one of the most powerful information brokers in the entire galaxy. But in the first game, by contrast, she serves as nothing but a cringy caricature of a Mary Sue, who can't help but trip over herself fawning over Commander Shepard every single step of the way.
But something was missing. Saren must have the missing information. Maybe he found another beacon. If we can find the missing data from your vision, I can... I am sorry. The joining is exhausting. I should go to the medical bay and lie down for a moment.
The companions here would have been much better served by more loyalty missions and content that could have fleshed them out and allowed them more time to develop and grow on the player. But as it stands, they're for the most part bland and one note, especially to how I see people talk about them online. I mean, truly, go and play something like Cyberpunk 2077 and then come back to me and try to tell me the characters are good here. It'll give you an idea of just how far we've come as an industry when Mass Effect 1 companions used to be considered the gold standard. But the thing is, for me, I don't mind this fallback all that much. Because for me, Mass Effect is about so much more than the melodrama and random quips between team members on planets. It's about a universe out there to explore, truly fascinating lore to uncover, and a story for the ages. And on that front, Mass Effect 1 in many ways puts the later titles to shame. And speaking of the later titles, we need to talk about my most controversial take for the entire series.
Your civilization is based on the technology of the mass relays. Our technology. By using it, your society develops along the paths we desire.
Mass Effect 1 is a funny game. It's archaic, pedantic, frustrating, and a lot of the time, just broken. And for that reason, most Mass Effect fans regard it as the worst game of the original series, a decent start that only got better with time. In fact, for most people, Mass Effect 2 is where the series peaks, with a third game that flounders the ending despite having some great moments, and a first game that just isn't fun to play. But I have a controversial take, and one I know that most people won't agree with. Despite all its flaws, Mass Effect 1 is still narrowly the best Mass Effect and the best game this series has ever seen, with the third game trailing only a little far behind, and controversially, the second being totally and utterly overrated. You see, what makes the first Mass Effect such an amazing experience is how much it focuses on what I believe is the core of the series: world building, storytelling, and scale. There are so many times playing through Mass Effect 1 where I just wanted to give up because of how janky everything felt, but there was always that something pulling me back in. Another story to listen to, another race of aliens to uncover and learn about, or a new location that was full of hundreds of years of backstory. Things like this are why Mass Effect is so good in the first place. Plenty of games have good characters or fun gameplay, but so few can capture our hearts and imaginations through nothing more than just the world. And Mass Effect 1 does this better than all the rest. It feels clean and pristine, but also dirty and horrific in places, like a beautiful painting hiding a tragic backstory. And as you peel back the layers of the universe in Mass Effect 1, it only becomes more and more enticing. It's the only game in the series that truly understood this concept fully, understanding that characters aren't what make the story interesting, the world and the narrative are what make the story interesting. It felt darker and more brooding at the time, sinister yet hopeful, and captured a tone and a sense of loneliness that is completely void in each and every other Mass Effect game. One second you will be in a pristine alien megaship, and the next in the bowels of a dark corridor on a broken planet, uncovering the secrets of aliens born millions of years ago. Mass Effect 2, by comparison, most players' claimed favorite, pushes the main narrative and world to the back and focuses almost entirely on a large cast of characters, which eventually end up feeling like a bunch of babysitting missions and mini-dramas that I didn't personally ask for. I don't care about some random girl with tattoos, daddy issues, and past trauma. I don't care about how a Solarian scientist feels about what he's done. I care about the lore, world building, and storytelling behind it all. Don't get me wrong, these characters are awesome, and I enjoy hearing about them sometimes, but only in service of something greater, the story. There is a literal war against machines with the power of gods who have wiped out civilization more times than humans can count, and yet for some reason in Mass Effect 2, instead of everyone pushing aside their petty squabbles or family drama, it becomes the focal point and only way to save the day. War isn't like that. War is brutal and unforgiving, where in order to survive, you must push aside your feelings and focus on what matters. Mass Effect 1 focused on the things that mattered, and crafted a darker tone and setting that fits the world of Mass Effect like a glove. It made everything feel more epic and more important. Its singular focus on the Reapers and the mystery behind them is what kept that story so interesting. And it's only in Mass Effect 3 that this narrative finally comes back into the fold, front and center once again. But I don't want to dive into Mass Effect 2 and 3 here too deeply. After all, I will be making another Before You Die on each of those as well eventually. For now, I just want to say that in my opinion, most of the Mass Effect community gets these games wrong. It's the third game, and especially the first, which truly define what makes this series great. And the second that is woefully overrated and loved when really it plays more like a Spanish melodrama than an actual spacefaring, universe-ending epic. Once again, I do love Mass Effect 2 as well, but it never kept me up at night like Mass Effect 1, looking out at the stars and wondering what's out there. Isn't that why we play sci-fi games in the first place? I can go and play other fantasy titles or any game for that matter and find some fairly interesting characters and listen to all their random bullshit and try to help them out. But Mass Effect is special because it created a genuinely fascinating sci-fi universe to get lost in. And there's no better way to prove this point, I think, than with the single most powerful moment in not just Mass Effect 1, but the entire series. A moment that proves just how much more important a focus on world building and storytelling is versus characters, because sometimes it can craft amazing characters all on its own anyways. Here is the moment you meet Sovereign for the first time in Mass Effect 1, a game that feels old and is boring to play, but it's here that you discover that Saren's ship is not just a machine, but an actual Reaper itself. So powerful and above comprehension that we are simply left hopeless to sit and listen as it mocks Shepard to his face and contextualizes the gravity of everything that is happening.
Your civilization is based on the technology of the mass relays. Our technology. By using it, your society develops along the paths we desire. We impose order on the chaos of organic evolution. You exist because we allow it.
This is why world building and writing are better than gameplay and characters. Mass Effect 1, to me at least, was never about the characters or the drama and missions. It was about quiet moments like this, where you simply had to sit back in awe at the mysteries and loneliness of space, wondering in your own head what might be out there, and what secrets there are to uncover in a world as fantastical as this. Mass Effect 1 may be the worst Mass Effect game ever made, but it has something truly special, a darker tone and feel, and focus on the really important things that none of the other titles can ever hope to surmount. But now we need to answer the question you're all here for in the first place. Should you play Mass Effect 1 before you die? Well, yes, but with a lot of caveats. The gameplay is archaic, the character writing is amateurish at times and quite one note, RPG mechanics are sorely lacking, sound mixing and presentation is jarring, navigation and quest markers are confusing, and overall, the game shows its age and has countless problems that many players might not be able to get past at all, and I wouldn't blame them. Actually playing Mass Effect 1 as a video game where you try to have fun is a torturous experience at times I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And I wouldn't be surprised if many new players just give up on it entirely and move on to the second game or write off the series as a whole. And yet, having said that, few titles in history have had this level of immersion, world building, and most importantly, soul. I cannot express just how captivating discovering and uncovering the secrets of the Mass Effect universe is for the first time. And only Mass Effect 1 truly nails this idea perfectly. More than any other games in the series, Mass Effect 1 itself feels alien and unknown, where the fundamental ideas of this universe are still being unearthed by the developers for the first time, taking you along a ride I consider one of the most captivating, if not the most captivating, in games history up to this point. There are moments in this main story that even 20 years later, I can't stop thinking about. It's a game that, despite how horribly it aged in many ways, still at the core of its art, the writing, main story, and world building stands taller than it did even on release, showing that if you make a universe as well thought out and realized as Mass Effect 1, it can never die. So if you haven't given Mass Effect 1 a try already, you need to. Not because you will have fun or love the moment-to-moment action. In fact, you might come away hating it. But because it tells a story and crafts a fictitious world that stands almost unparalleled, and perfectly shows why I think story matters in games even more than gameplay. After all, gameplay is always improved and iterated upon over time. Higher frame rates with better hardware, more interesting movement tech, better hit registration, and so on and so on. But a great story in a world you can't forget, that's timeless. Like Homer's Odyssey, Mass Effect 1 won't be remembered for just the action, but the entire adventure it took us on along the way, and the feelings it gives you that will sit with you for a lifetime. If there ever was a quintessential example of a game that you won't love playing, but that you need to play before you die, most of all for the vigor it will give your soul, it's Mass Effect 1. But as always, thank you all so much for watching, and let me know down below how you're liking the Before You Die series and any suggestions you guys have on how I can update the format or improve things here and there, because I love making these videos and I want to keep going with this series and see how much better we can make it. But thanks again, and I'll see you all on the next one.